The sun carved harsh shadows across the Wyoming Badlands as 73-year-old Garrison Fletch urged his buckskin gelding, Brimstone, down the familiar canyon trail. For 20 years, this had been their ritual, man and horse moving through the wilderness like ghosts, speaking only in the language of subtle shifts in weight and gentle pressure from weathered hands. Garrison's wife, Marlo, had died decades ago, taking with her the sound of laughter that once echoed through their ranch house. Since then, words had become as scarce as water in August. Brimstone's ears suddenly pricked forward, swiveling like radar dishes catching a distant signal. The horse's nostrils flared, and his steady gait faltered. Garrison felt the change immediately. After 20 years together, they were extensions of each other. Something was wrong. "Easy, boy," Garrison murmured, his voice rusty from disuse. It was the first word he'd spoken aloud in 3 days. The horse snorted and shook his massive head, taking a step sideways. Brimstone had never been skittish. During thunderstorms that sent other horses into panic, he stood calm as stone. When coyotes howled too close to camp, he simply flicked his ears in acknowledgement and continued grazing. But now, the powerful gelding trembled beneath Garrison's legs. Then Garrison heard it, a sound so faint he might have dismissed it as wind through the rocks. But Brimstone heard it too, his body tensing like a coiled spring. It came again, clearer. This time, a child's sob, echoing off the canyon walls. Without waiting for direction, Brimstone turned toward the sound, picking his way carefully down a narrow deer path that branched off the main trail. Garrison let him lead, trusting the horse's instincts more than his own aging senses. The crying grew louder, more desperate. They emerged into a small clearing where a weathered cabin squatted among the scrub oak. Its roof partially collapsed, windows dark as dead eyes. The sound was coming from inside. Garrison dismounted slowly, his joints protesting after hours in the saddle. He approached the cabin cautiously, Brimstone following close behind like a loyal dog. The sobbing stopped abruptly, replaced by the terrified silence of someone trying to become invisible. "Hello," Garrison called softly. His voice cracked from disuse. "Anyone there?" A small face appeared at the broken window, a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with tangled auburn hair and eyes wide with fear. Tears had carved clean tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered. Garrison's heart clenched. He removed his hat, running gnarled fingers through his gray hair. "I'm not going to hurt you." "Child, my name's Garrison. What's yours?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Paisley." "That's a pretty name," Garrison said gently. "Paisley, what are you doing out here all alone?" Fresh tears spilled down her face. "I got lost. Mama and I were hiking, and I chased a butterfly, and when I turned around, she was gone. I've been walking for 2 days." Garrison's blood ran cold. 2 days in this wilderness would be a death sentence for a child. The nights dropped below freezing, and there were mountain lions in these canyons. "It's going to be okay now," he said, meaning it. "We're going to find your mama." Paisley emerged from the cabin like a frightened deer, clutching a tattered stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Garrison noticed her lips were chapped and cracked, her small hands trembling, not just from fear but from dehydration and exposure. He pulled a water bottle from his saddlebag and offered it to her. "Drink slow," he advised as she grabbed it eagerly. "Just sips." While she drank, Garrison studied the child. Her clothes were expensive designer hiking boots, a small backpack with reflective strips, the kind of gear wealthy city folks bought for their outdoor adventures. But her face told a different story. This wasn't just a lost tourist child. There was something deeper in her eyes, a wariness that spoke of harder truths. "Paisley, where were you and your mama hiking?" "What trail?" The girl wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, the one with the big rocks that looked like a castle. "Mama said we were going to see where the eagles nest." Garrison knew the Spot Castle Rock Trail, about 15 miles north, but something didn't add up. That trail was well marked, and it would take deliberate effort to get this far off course. "How long have you been walking?" 2 days, she repeated, "maybe 3. I slept in that scary house last night." Brimstone moved closer to the girl, lowering his great head to sniff her gently. Instead of backing away, Paisley reached out tentatively and touched the horse's soft muzzle. Brimstone whickered softly, a sound Garrison hadn't heard from him in months. "He likes you," Garrison observed. For the first time, a tiny smile crossed Paisley's face. "Is he your friend?" "Best friend I've got," Garrison admitted. "His name's Brimstone, but he's gentler than his name sounds," as if to prove the point. Brimstone nuzzled the girl's hand, looking for treats. Paisley giggled a sound like water over stones that made something tight in Garrison's chest loosen. "Can you ride him?" she asked. "Every day for 20 years. Wanna try?" The fear returned to her eyes. "I don't know how. Brimstone will take care of you. I promise." It took some coaxing, but eventually Garrison lifted Paisley onto Brimstone's broad back. The horse stood perfectly still, as if he understood the precious nature of his cargo. Garrison climbed up behind her, and they set off toward Castle Rock. Trailed out as they rode, Paisley began to talk. The words tumbled out of her like water through a broken dam, as if she'd been holding them back for days. She told him about her mama, about their apartment in Denver, about how they'd come to Wyoming for a special trip. But the more she talked, the more questions rose in Garrison's mind. "Paisley, what's your mama's name?" "Callista," the girl said. "Callista Moorfield. And your daddy?" The girl went quiet. "I don't have a daddy anymore." They rode in silence after that, Garrison processing what he'd learned. A single mother from Denver, hiking alone with her young daughter in unfamiliar territory. People didn't usually disappear from Castle Rock Trail. It was too well-traveled, too safe. When they reached the trailhead, Garrison's suspicions deepened. There was no car in the parking area, no sign that anyone had been there recently. The trail register showed no entries for the past. "Wake, Paisley," he said carefully. "Are you sure this is where you started hiking with your mama?" The girl's face crumpled. I think so. Everything looks different." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Garrison made a decision. They would make camp here tonight and start fresh in the morning. But first, he needed to call for help. His satellite phone crackled to life, and he dialed the Park Service. But as he waited for someone to answer, he couldn't shake the feeling that Paisley's story was more complicated than a simple hiking accident. The Park Service ranger who arrived at dawn was a compact woman named Quinlan Reeves, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She examined the scene with professional thoroughness, while Paisley slept curled against Brimstone's side, the horse standing guard like a devoted sentinel. No missing person reports matching her description, Quinlan reported quietly to Garrison. As they stood apart from the sleeping child, no abandoned vehicles. No Callista Moorfield registered at any of the local lodges or campgrounds. Garrison's jaw tightened. The girl's not lying. I didn't say she was. But children sometimes get confused, especially when they're traumatized. Quinlan studied Paisley's sleeping form. "Look at her clothes. Those aren't hiking clothes. That's a school dress under that jacket." She was right. Now that Garrison looked closer, he could see that Paisley wore a navy blue jumper with a white blouse, uniform clothes, not outdoor gear. "There's something else," Quinlan continued. "I ran her description through the system. There's an Amber Alert out of Colorado for a Paisley Hartwell, 9 years old, auburn hair, green eyes, taken by her non-custodial mother 3 days ago." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Garrison looked at the sleeping child, his heart breaking. "She doesn't know, does she?" "Probably not. Kids in parental abduction cases often don't understand what's happening. They just know something's wrong." Paisley stirred, opening her eyes to find both adults watching her. She sat up quickly, alarm replacing sleepiness. "Where's my mama?" Garrison knelt beside her, choosing his words carefully. "Paisley, we're still looking for her. But I need to ask you something important. Do you remember your daddy?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Daddy's in heaven. That's what Mama said." "What about? Do you remember anyone else who took care of you? Maybe someone named Hartwell?" The girl's face went white. "That's Grandpa Mitchell's name, but Mama said we can't see him anymore because he's mean to her." Quinlan stepped forward gently. "Paisley, honey, we think your mama might be in trouble. We need to make sure you're safe." "I want my mama," Paisley cried, scrambling to her feet. "She's lost," We have to find her." She ran toward the trees, but Brimstone moved faster. The horse stepped sideways, blocking her path with his bulk while remaining gentle. Paisley collapsed against his shoulder, sobbing. Garrison felt something shift inside him, a paternal instinct he'd thought died with his own childless marriage. This girl needed protection, needed someone to fight for her. But the law was the law, and she had a father who was probably desperate to find her. What happens now? He asked Quinlan. Social services will take her back to Colorado. She'll go to her father while they sort out the custody situation. And the mother, if we find her, she'll face kidnapping charges. As if summoned by their conversation, Paisley looked up from Brimstone's neck. Is my daddy alive? The question hung in the air like smoke. Garrison met her eyes, seeing the confusion and desperate hope there. Double quotes. Yes, sweetheart, your daddy's alive, and he's been looking for you. Fresh tears came, but these were different tears of relief mixed with confusion and fear. Then why did Mama say he was in heaven? It was a question with no good answer, at least none that a 9-year-old could understand. Garrison looked at Quinlan, who nodded grimly. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, Garrison said finally. Big mistakes. But what matters now is that you're safe. As they prepared to leave the wilderness, Paisley clung to Brimstone's neck. Can he come with me? Horses can't ride in cars, sweetheart. Will I ever see him again? Garrison felt his throat close up. In all likelihood, the answer was no. Once she returned to Colorado, to her real life, this would become just a strange chapter in her story. But looking at her tear-streaked face, he couldn't bear to say it. Maybe, he said instead, hating himself for the false hope. 3 days later, Garrison sat in his kitchen staring at a cold cup of coffee when his satellite phone rang. The voice on the other end was strained with exhaustion and raw emotion. "Mr. Fletch, this is Dorian Hartwell, Paisley's father." Garrison straightened. "How is she?" Confused, scared. "The counselors say it'll take time." Dorian's voice cracked. "She keeps asking about your horse, says he was her friend when she was afraid." Through the window, Garrison could see Brimstone in his pasture, head hanging low. The horse had been listless since Paisley left, barely touching his food. "Mr. Fletch, I need to ask you something. The rangers told me you found her in an old cabin. Did she say anything about her mother, about where Callista might have gone?" Garrison closed his eyes, remembering. "She mentioned that your wife had been acting strange the last few weeks. Kept talking about starting over somewhere new." "Ex-wife," Dorian corrected bitterly. "She took Paisley from school, told her I was dead. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? To me?" The pain in the man's voice was raw, familiar. Garrison remembered his own grief when Marlo died, the way it had shaped every day since. But this was different. Dorian's wife was alive, had chosen to tear their family apart. "They haven't found her yet, no trace. It's like she vanished." Dorian paused. "Mr. Fletch, I have a favor to ask. It might sound crazy, but Paisley hasn't spoken much since she came home. The only time she gets animated is when she talks about Brimstone. Would it be possible for us to visit? I know it's a long way, but..." "Yes," Garrison said, without hesitation. "When?" "This weekend. I'll drive up from Denver. I just want her to smile again." After hanging up, Garrison walked out to the pasture. Brimstone lifted his head, ears forward with interest, the first real sign of life he'd shown in days. "Got some visitors coming, old friend. Think you can manage to be on your best behavior?" Saturday arrived gray and cold, with snow threatening. In the low clouds, Garrison had spent the morning cleaning his rarely used guest room and making a grocery run to town, his first human contact in weeks. When the silver SUV pulled up his long driveway, he felt an unfamiliar flutter of nervousness. Paisley erupted from the car like a small hurricane, racing toward the pasture where Brimstone waited. The horse nickered with obvious delight, trotting to the fence with more energy than Garrison had seen from him in months. "Brimstone," Paisley cried, climbing onto the fence rail. "I missed you so much." Dorian Hartwell was a lean man in his early 40s, with tired eyes and the kind of hollow look that came from weeks of fear and sleepless nights. He approached Garrison with his hand extended. "I can't thank you enough," Dorian said. The Rangers told me you probably saved her life. Brimstone. Did the finding, Garrison replied. I just followed. They watched Paisley feed the horse carrots from her pocket, chattering to him as if he were her oldest friend. For the first time since he'd found her, she looked like a normal child. She's been having nightmares, Dorian said quietly. Keeps dreaming that she's lost in the woods and no one can find her. But last night, she dreamed about riding your horse through sunflower fields. Something loosened in Garrison's chest. She's welcome here anytime. That's just it, Dorian said. Turning to face him, I've been thinking about what's best for Paisley. Her whole world got turned upside down. She doesn't trust easily anymore. Doesn't believe adults when they tell her things will be okay. But she trusts you. She trusts Brimstone. Garrison waited, sensing there was more. I work remotely software development. I can work from anywhere with internet. Dorian looked around at the vast landscape. What would you say to some long-term house guests? The first winter with Dorian and Paisley at the ranch was the hardest and best season Garrison had experienced in 2 decades. The old house, silent for so long, suddenly rang with the sounds of life. Paisley's laughter, Dorian's keyboard clicking late into the night, the whistle of the tea kettle, and conversations around the dinner table that stretched long past sunset. Paisley threw herself into ranch life with the enthusiasm only children possess. She learned to curry Brimstone, 2 muck stalls, and to read the weather by watching the horses' behavior. Under Garrison's patient tutelage, she became a capable rider, fearless in the way that terrified and amazed the adults. She's never been this confident, Dorian confided one evening as they watched Paisley practice her roping skills in the corral. Before Callista took her, she was timid, afraid of her own shadow. The divorce was hard on her. Garrison nodded, remembering his own childhood on his grandfather's ranch. Horses teach you things about yourself, good and bad. What do they teach you about trust? It was a loaded question. Garrison glanced at Dorian, noting the careful way he asked it. That it has to be earned. Every day, spring brought unexpected challenges. Paisley began asking harder questions about her mother, where she was, why she'd lied, whether she was ever coming back. The nightmares returned, and with them, moments of rage that surprised everyone with their intensity. I hate her, Paisley screamed one afternoon after a particularly difficult session. With her court-mandated therapist via video call, she lied to me. She said Daddy was dead. She ran from the house toward the pasture, where Brimstone waited like a patient counselor. Garrison found her there an hour later, curled against the horse's side in the grass, her tears spent. She's still your mama, Garrison said gently, settling beside them. She's not. Mamas don't lie like that. People make mistakes, even mamas. Paisley looked at him with eyes far too old for her face. Did your mama ever lie to you? The question caught him off guard. Yes, she told me everything would be okay when my daddy was dying. But she was trying to protect me from hurt. Was she wrong to lie? Garrison considered this. Maybe, but she did it because she loved me. Then why don't I feel loved? It was the heart of it, the one that might never fully heal. Garrison had no easy answers, only the hard-won wisdom of his own losses. Love isn't always gentle, he said finally. Sometimes people love so much it makes them do crazy things. Doesn't make it right, but it doesn't make the love less real either. Summer brought a breakthrough. Paisley started talking about the future instead of dwelling on the past. She wanted to learn to train horses, maybe become a veterinarian. She drew pictures of herself and Brimstone jumping over streams and racing across meadows. The nightmares became less frequent. Dorian began looking at local schools, talking about making their arrangement permanent. The custody battle was over. Callista had been found in Mexico and had agreed to sign away her parental rights. Rather than face kidnapping charges, Paisley would stay with her father, and they could live wherever they chose. She's healing, Dorian said one evening as they watched Paisley give Brimstone his evening brushing. For the first time since the divorce, she seems like herself again. What about you? Garrison asked. You healing too? Dorian was quiet for a long moment. I was angry for so long. At Callista, at the system, at myself for not seeing the signs. But watching Paisley here, seeing her confidence grow, It's hard to stay angry when your child is finally happy. This place has a way of putting things in perspective, Garrison agreed. Garrison, there's something I need to tell you. Dorian's voice carried a weight that made Garrison look at him sharply. The ranch next to yours is going up for sale. The Winters place. Garrison knew it 1,500 acres of good grazing land with a decent house and outbuildings. He'd always wondered what would happen when old Harvey Winters passed. I'm thinking of buying it. Dorian continued, if you're okay with having permanent neighbors. The offer hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Garrison thought about the past months, how the loneliness that had defined his days for 20 years had gradually been replaced by purpose, by family in a way he'd never expected. Might be nice, he said finally, having folks nearby. 1 year after finding Paisley in the abandoned cabin, Garrison stood on his porch watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. The Winters place now bustled with activity. Dorian had not only bought the ranch, but had turned it into a working horse rescue operation. Paisley, now 10 and fearless on horseback, had become his most dedicated volunteer. The sound of hoof beats drew his attention. Paisley and Brimstone appeared over the ridge, the girl sitting tall in the saddle as the gelding picked his way down the familiar trail. She'd grown 3 inches in the past year, her auburn hair now braided practically down her back, her face glowing with health and confidence. Morning, Grandpa Garrison, she called, using the title she'd bestowed on him months ago. It had taken some getting used to, but now he couldn't imagine being called anything else. Morning, little bit. You're out early. Brimstone wanted to show me something, she said, dismounting with practiced ease. He kept trying to go toward the old cabin. Garrison's blood chilled. They'd avoided that area since bringing Paisley home, by unspoken agreement. You didn't go there, did you? Just to the clearing. And guess what? There was a mare there with a foal. They looked lost and scared. Before Garrison could respond, Dorian appeared on his ATV, looking harried. Did she tell you about the horses? Just now. Wild ones, don't think so. The mare's wearing a halter, and the foal shows signs of human handling. Someone's missing some valuable animals. As they spoke, Paisley had retrieved binoculars from Dorian's ATV and was scanning the horizon. There, she pointed toward a distant cloud of dust. Riders coming this way. 3 horses and riders emerged from the morning haze, moving fast. As they drew closer, Garrison could see the lead rider was a woman with silver-streaked hair, her face etched with worry and determination. That's my mare, the woman called as she approached. Moonlight, is she hurt? She's fine, Paisley assured her. She's got a baby with her. They're in the clearing by the old cabin. The woman who introduced herself as Vera Ashland from the neighboring county explained that her prize Arabian mare had escaped during a storm 2 nights before. She was pregnant and overdue, and Vera had been searching frantically. She must have found a safe place to foal, Vera said gratefully. Horses have good instincts about these things. As they rode toward the clearing, Paisley chattered excitedly to Vera about the rescue operation, about Brimstone's wisdom, about how horses always seemed to know when someone needed help. Garrison listened, marveling at the child's transformation from the frightened, lost girl he'd found a year ago. At the clearing, they found the mare grazing peacefully while her hours-old colt nursed. The scene was peaceful, almost sacred in the morning light. Look, Paisley whispered in wonder. She chose the same place where you found me, where she knew she'd be safe. The parallel wasn't lost on any of the adults. Vera's eyes filled with tears as she approached her mare, crooning softly, "Good girl, Moonlight. You found the perfect place. It is a special place," Garrison agreed, looking around the clearing with new eyes, a place where lost things get found. As they prepared to lead the mare and foal back to Vera's ranch, she turned to Paisley with a smile. "You know, I could use some help training this little one when he's old enough. Would you be interested in learning about Arabian horses?" Paisley's eyes lit up like stars. "Could I really, if it's okay with your family?" Dorian and Garrison exchanged glances. In the past year, they'd become a family in every way that mattered, not the traditional kind, but something forged by circumstance and strengthened by choice. "I think that would be fine," Dorian said. As They rode back toward home, Paisley between Garrison and her father. Brimstone steady and sure beneath her, Garrison reflected on the strange turns life could take. A year ago, he'd been a lonely old man counting down his days in solitude. Now he was part of something larger, a grandfather to a spirited girl, a friend to her father, a mentor to a growing community of horse lovers and rescuers. Grandpa Garrison, Paisley said as they crested the hill overlooking both ranches. Do you think everything happens for a reason? He considered the question seriously, as he always did with her. I think sometimes bad things happen for no reason at all, but I also think if we pay attention, we can usually find ways to make something good come from them. Like me getting lost led me to you and Brimstone, exactly like that. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, do you think my mama will ever want to see me again? It was a question she asked periodically, usually when she was processing her feelings about the past. Garrison had learned to answer honestly, but hopefully. I don't know, little bit, but I know that wherever she is, she's missing out on watching you become the amazing person you're meant to be. I'm going to send her a picture of me and Brimstone jumping the creek. That sounds like a good idea. As they reached the barn, Garrison realized that somewhere in the past year, without him noticing, the ache of loneliness that had defined his life for 2 decades had completely disappeared. He'd found his purpose again in this unlikely family, in watching Paisley grow strong and confident, in helping Dorian heal from his own wounds. That evening, as he did every day now, Garrison sat on his porch watching Paisley practice her riding. In the corral while Dorian worked on his laptop nearby, Brimstone moved with the patient grace of a teacher, adjusting his gait to match his young rider's skill, always keeping her safe. The sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, and somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied, perhaps Vera's new colt, perhaps one of their rescue horses, perhaps just the wind carrying the promise of tomorrow. Garrison smiled, content in the knowledge that after 74 years of life, he was exactly where he belonged. 5 years after that first fateful ride, Garrison Fletch stood at the edge of his property watching 15-year-old Paisley work with a traumatized Mustang in the round pen. Her movements were sure and patient, her voice calm and encouraging. The wild horse, rescued from a kill pen just weeks before, already showed signs of trust. Easy, Thunder, she murmured, never taking her eyes off the black gelding. Nobody's going to hurt you here. At 78, Garrison moved more slowly than he once had, but his mind remained sharp, and his heart had never been fuller. The horse rescue operation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as Dorian's way of giving Paisley purpose had become a recognized sanctuary, drawing volunteers and visitors from across the region. Brimstone, now 32 and officially retired from riding, held court in the pasture closest to the house. His buckskin coat had gone almost white with age, but his eyes remained bright and knowing. Children from the youth programs Paisley had started would sit with him for hours, telling him their troubles the way she once had. He's still the best therapist we have, Dorian often joked, but there was truth in it. The old horse had an uncanny ability to sense which children needed gentleness and which needed challenge. Grandpa G, Paisley called from the pen, using her newest nickname for him. Watch this. She extended her hand toward Thunder, who had been backing away from human contact since his arrival. To Garrison's amazement, the Mustang stretched his neck and briefly touched her palm with his muzzle before dancing away. First touch, she announced triumphantly. He's ready to start trusting. Dorian emerged from the barn, now sporting gray at his temples and the confident bearing of a man who'd found his calling. That's faster than most of them, he observed. You're getting good at reading them. Brimstone taught me, Paisley said simply. He taught me that trust isn't about forcing anything. It's about being worth trusting. That evening, as had become their tradition, 3 generations sat on Garrison's porch watching the sunset. Paisley, now tall and lean with her mother's auburn hair but her father's steady eyes, was preparing for her junior year of high school. She'd been accepted to an elite equine studies program and planned to become an equine therapist. Got a letter today, Garrison announced, pulling an envelope from his shirt pocket. From Vera Ashland. Paisley looked up with interest. Vera had become a close friend and mentor over the years. and her horses had become the foundation of their breeding program. What'd she say? Moonlight's grandson took first place at the State Arabian show. The one you gentled as a foal. Paisley beamed with pride. It had been her first real training success, and the colt's achievements validated everything she'd learned about working with young horses. There's more, Garrison continued. She wants to know if you'd be interested in spending the summer at her ranch in Montana. Says she's got 3 new foals that could use your touch. Really? Paisley's eyes lit up with the same wonder Garrison remembered from the lost little girl he'd found 6 years ago. Could I really go? It would mean leaving Brimstone for 2 months, Dorian pointed out gently. Paisley's face fell slightly. The bond between girl and horse remained as strong as ever. Even though she rode other horses now, Brimstone was her confidant, her touchstone, her first and greatest teacher. Maybe he could come with me. Garrison shook his head gently. He's too old for that kind of travel. Little bit. But maybe it's time to trust that what he's taught you will carry you even when he's not there. It was a hard lesson, but an important one. Paisley was growing up, and part of growing up meant learning to carry the love and wisdom of others, even when they couldn't be physically present. I'll think about it, she said finally. That night Garrison couldn't sleep. He walked out to the pasture where Brimstone stood dozing under the stars. The old horse lifted his head at his approach, nickering softly. She's almost grown, Garrison told him. Hard to believe that scared little girl we found is turning into such a remarkable young woman. Brimstone moved closer, resting his great head against Garrison's shoulder. They stood together in comfortable silence, to old friends who'd shared more adventures than either had expected. You know what the best part is? Garrison continued. She's not running from her past anymore. She's using it to help others. It was true. Paisley had become the heart of their youth programs, working with children who'd experienced trauma, abandonment, and loss. Her ability to connect with both horses and troubled kids was almost supernatural. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A social worker named Marcus Webb arrived with 2 children siblings who'd been removed from an abusive home and were struggling in foster care. The boy, perhaps 8 years old, clutched his sister's hand with fierce protectiveness. The girl, maybe 6, hadn't spoken since her removal from her home. We've heard about your program, Marcus explained. These 2 have been through 5 placements in 6 months. Nobody knows how to reach them. Paisley took one look at the children and led them straight to Brimstone. The old horse stood perfectly still as the little girl approached, her eyes wide with wonder. When she reached out to touch his muzzle, he lowered his head to her level. He likes you, Paisley said softly. His name is Brimstone, but he's not scary at all. Want to brush him for the next hour? Garrison watched as Paisley worked her magic. By the time Marcus was ready to leave, both children were talking tentatively, but talking. They'd be back tomorrow and the day after that. Where did she learn to do that? Marcus asked in amazement. From him, Garrison nodded toward Brimstone, and from her own experience of being lost and scared. As summer approached, Paisley made her decision. She would go to Montana, but she wanted to establish a scholarship program first away for underprivileged children, to attend horse camps using funds raised through the rescue's activities. It's what Brimstone would want, she explained. He found me when I was lost. Now we can help find other lost kids. On the day before her departure, Paisley spent the entire day with Brimstone. She brushed him until his white coat gleamed, braided flowers into his mane, and told him about her plans and dreams. Garrison watched from a distance, remembering his own goodbye to his grandfather's horse decades ago.